Good morning, and as you can see on the screen, we're going to continue in our study of Revelation. This is not a Bible class. This is more like a Bible lecture, but bear in mind that everything I've done here in preparing this study on Revelation, I've quoted people sometimes. I'm not real good at giving credit to everybody. Sometimes you'll see someone's name mentioned in there, some commentator or something. But what I've done is try to give you information that helps us understand better the book of Revelation, why it was written, and hopefully what all these prophecies really mean as we go along. And I don't pretend to know everything there is about the book of Revelation, but this is what I have put together. And so we're going to talk about that message from Patmos, the island of Patmos. John had been exiled there, as we have studied in the past. And this, of course, is when we get the revelation of Jesus Christ. All right, just a quick refresher here on a couple things. We first studied about the background, why the book of Revelation was written, and all the things that were happening in the world at that time, the world as we know it at least. And then we looked at the preface, and this was information that would help us as we went through the study to understand more appropriately, hopefully, why all these things are there in the book of Revelation, in the letter from Jesus, I should say. Then we looked at the majestic Christ. We looked at his glory and how everything we learn about him fits into our lives, and to understand better, once again, things that we learn as we go along. And then finally, we talked about Jesus amidst the churches. And this is the 7 churches of Asia that we discussed, and learned that there's some churches had some serious problems, others pretty good shape, if you want to put it. But the thing that I never mentioned as we went through that part of is that how does everything that's presented there apply to us as a church in this day and time, almost 2,000 years later? And oops, these are upcoming lessons. The more we're going to do today, you'll see in just a moment. We're going to look at the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 personages, the 7 vials of wrath, and then we're going to look at the doom of Babylon. And of course, we keep in mind Babylon in this case is figurative for Rome. We just have to understand, because this is where the persecution was coming from. It was coming from Rome. And the Christians were suffering, many Christians were suffering dearly, not only the threat of their lives, but sometimes it meant losing their jobs because they claimed to be Christians and not being able to meet their needs of themselves or their families. Oops, get back on the screen. Then we're going to look at the vision of victory. This is down the road a ways now, of course, but giving you a little reminder. The New Jerusalem, which is completely misunderstood by a lot of the religious world, of course. And then we'll see the conclusion. Today's topic is this, the throne scene. This is where we get away from what's happening on earth to what's happening in heaven. Okay, throne scene, Revelation 4. And this also entails Revelation 5 too, when we get to that point. I'm going to switch my glasses here. It's a lot easier. For me to see this. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard, now this is John writing, of course. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, "Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this." Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne, in appearance an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. And from the throne proceeded lightnings, thunderings, and voices. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Before the throne, there was a sea of glass like crystal. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like a calf. The third living creature had a face like a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. The 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within. And they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. So now we see the scene changing in chapter 4 from God's earthly footstool to his heavenly throne. Like I said a moment ago, we're leaving earth and going to heaven in this vision that John has. The throne stands for God's majesty and power, and that throne is mentioned in every chapter except 2, 8, and 9. In chapters 4 and 5, it is mentioned 17 times total between the 2 chapters. Chapter 4 marks the actual beginning of the main part of the apocalypse, whereas the preceding chapters were preparatory. I guess the best way to say it is you got to know what was happening so you understand what's going to happen. Chapters 4 and 5 show us that our affairs rest not in the hands of men, but in God. So, though Domitian was exerting his imperial power with a vengeance, and the oppressed saints were confronted with seemingly innumerable odds, the throne scene assures the Christian that God rules over and controls the affairs of men. In the very center of the vision is the sovereign God on his throne. Just a quick mention here about Domitian. He was the emperor at the time all of this was happening. He got great joy of persecuting Christians, and his attempt always was to get, especially if a man had a family, to get him to deny Christ with the threat of his family suffering death as a result if he would not deny Christ. That was one of the things he had great joy about, because he liked to play with the minds of people more, although there was plenty of other persecution going on too, the being fed to the lions. It was a bad time for Christians. If you were a Christian at that time, you had to have the faith that God would overcome all of this and that you would be saved in the end. Continuing on the throne zone, we're looking at God's magnificence. John is invited to come to heaven. After these things I looked, and we're going to be looking at passages from what we read just a few moments ago. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, Come up here, and I will show you things which must take place after this. Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. So John's invited to come to heaven. Let's look at this trumpet stuff for just a moment. What significance does a voice like a trumpet have? Trumpets, properly played, are very loud. That's one thing, and they get your attention. So this is important for us to understand, because we're going to see the trumpet plays in God's work, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And so, of course, we know it's a band instrument, but what other uses has it served? Well, here's a couple of them right now. Ezekiel 33, verse 4, then whoever hears the sound of the trumpet and does not take warning, if the sword comes and takes him away, his blood shall be on his own head. Now, you hear the sound of the trumpet and it's properly warning you, and you don't do anything, it's your fault. Whoops, back up here. In 1 Corinthians 14:8, Paul said this. He says, for if the trumpet makes an uncertain sound, who will prepare himself for battle? A few other ones here from Hebrews 12:18-19. For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them anymore. This is referring to the time the Israelites after they left Egypt. Matthew 24:31, and he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet. And then 1 Thessalonians 4:16, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God. So, once again, trumpets, the sound of a trumpet should get your attention. I've been to bases, haven't been in the military, where the trumpet's heard in the morning, the trumpet's heard at night, and you hear it all over the base. Okay. The description of the throne scene itself includes Jasper and Sardius stone and a rainbow like an emerald. These are symbols, along with other depictions meant to describe the awesomeness of God's power and majesty. And we're going to look at that a little bit more here shortly. And it's interesting to note that while the word Jasper appears in all of the commonly used Bible translations, the word Sardius has various renditions. From the interlinear, which is the Greek, along with the Bible translation itself, the word Sardius has various renditions. From the interlinear, the Greek word is sardio, which is then translated to sardius, sardine, or carnelian. And I found even, there was another one, it was just sard, S-A-R-D. But the point of it is that one word is used all the time, and the other word has various renditions, of course. So what does John say? Here in Revelation 4, verses 3 and 5, and he who sat there was like a jasper and a sardius stone in appearance. So what is the significance of these precious stones? This jasper is a transparent stone, which yet offers to the eye a variety of the most vivid colors, signifying the glorious perfections of God. And then the sardine stone is red, signifying the justice of God. Now I've done a lot of research on that, and that seems to be the understanding from many who comment on this particular passage. And there was a rainbow around the throne in appearance like an emerald. What's the significance of the rainbow and why emerald? Rainbow around the throne, a complete circle, type of God's perfection and eternity, not a half circle as the earthly rainbow, surrounding the throne vertically, and the emerald, which is a gorgeous green color, representative of all the living vegetation that makes the earth such a pleasant place to dwell. Of course, the earth is God's creation. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. We'll discuss them later. And from the throne proceeded lightnings, thunderings, and voices. So what about these lightnings, thunderings, and voices? Got some passages here first. Revelation 10, 1 through 4. John says, I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud. And a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. He had a little book open in his hand. He set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land, and cried with a loud voice as when a lion roars. When he cried out, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Now, when the 7 thunders uttered their voices, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered and do not write them. We're going to look here in just a second at the giving of the law, Exodus 19, verse 16. The thunderings express God's threats against the ungodly. There are voices in them, and we already saw that. Not only does he threaten generally, but predicts special judgments. So then in Exodus 19:16, on the morning of the 3rd day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. That was when the law was given. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And what's those significance? The 7 lamps of fire. The 7 lamps of fire seem to represent the passion of the 7 spirits of God. And the 7 spirits of God are a representation of the Holy Spirit's gifts and activities, and are described in the Bible in Isaiah 11, 2 and 3. Spirit of the Lord, Spirit of wisdom, Spirit of understanding, Spirit of counsel, Spirit of might, Spirit of knowledge, and Spirit of fear of the Lord. And that's the best I could find on that. And I found others that agreed with me, or I agreed with them, however you want to look at it. Before the throne, there was a sea of glass, like crystal. Now, I'm going to give you just a little hint here about this. Whenever you see like something, that's because there's no way to actually properly describe something. When, as we see here, a sea of glass, how else would John be able to describe that? We don't know. He says it's like a sea of glass. And we're going to see that used several times here. What is the significance of the sea of glass? We'll go into a little more detail here. Revelation 4, verse 6 says, before the throne there was, as it were, a sea of glass, like crystal. And Revelation 15:2 says, I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass, mingled with fire. In neither verse does John say that he saw a literal sea of glass. Rather, he says, there was, as it were, a sea of glass, and I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass. The words of comparison make a big difference. It's one thing to say you were struck by lightning. It's quite another to say you feel as if you were struck by lightning. And we see here in Revelation 21:21, the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each individual gate was of 1 pearl. and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. And then in Revelation 21:11, her light, this is referring to the New Jerusalem, was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. Now, just a little more discussion about the jasper stone. It's a clear stone, if we're using the word stone, but you can see colors in it, if that makes any sense. That's the best way to describe it. That's all I can say about it. But the jasper stone was used in the Old Testament as well as New Testament. We're going to see that here in just a minute. In the Bible, jasper is a precious stone frequently mentioned, often symbolizing God's glory, beauty, and holiness. It's featured in descriptions of the New Jerusalem and the appearance of God, highlighting its brilliance and purity. Jasper is also used in the high priest's breastplate in the Old Testament and the foundations of the New Jerusalem, representing the strength and permanence of God's promises. And so here's the full context of Revelation 21:10 and 11. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. Her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And then on our sardius again, it's also known as carnelian. It is a precious stone mentioned several times in the Bible, primarily in the context of the high priest's breastplate and the description of the New Jerusalem. This gemstone is characterized by its deep red to reddish brown color, which has made it a symbol of beauty and significance throughout biblical history. And then Revelation 21:19 and 20. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third chalcedony, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth sardius, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. So these are all visions as John's seeing. Keep that in mind. But describing the magnificence, try to say that wrong here again, of what God is creating and what lies ahead in times to come. Now, back to our elders we talked about a couple of minutes ago. The word elders appears 12 times in Revelation. And there are at least two thoughts on what the 24 elders represent. Why 24 elders around the throne? In Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 7 through 18, there are 24 courses of Levitical priests appointed. It has been suggested that they represent the eternal priesthood. Another view is that the 24 elders represent the 12 patriarchs of Israel and the 12 apostles of Christ, symbols of both dispensations. There are other interpretations as well, but this second one seems to fit the Revelation theme better. Of course, the focus, more appropriately, should be on what they do, less, in this case, on what they represent. It's not the same as sardius stone or the jasper stone representing different things. This is what they should be doing, and you will see what they do, plenty of that. Okay, what does John see again? We see that surround the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. Whenever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before the throne and say, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being. Once again, what does John see? Revelation 4, 6 through 8. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were four living creatures full of eyes in front and in back. We've already read this, but we're doing it again. The first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like a calf. The third living creature had a face like a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. The four living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within. First of all, these creatures are not to be confused with the beast in chapter 13, but rather they are living creatures in the midst of the throne. A similar symbol is found in Ezekiel chapter 10. This is 9 through 17. And when I looked, there were 4 wheels by the cherubim, one wheel by one cherubim, and another wheel by each other cherubim. The wheels appeared to have the color of a beryl stone. As for their appearance, all 4 looked alike, as it were a wheel in the middle of a wheel. When they went toward any of their 4 directions, they did not turn aside when they went, but followed in the direction the head was facing. They did not turn aside when they went, and their whole body with their back, their hands, their wings, and their wheels that the 4 had were full of eyes all around. As for the wheels, they were called in my hearing wheel. Each one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, the second face, the face of a man, the third face of a lion, and the fourth, the face of an eagle. And the cherubim were lifted up. This was the living creature I saw by the river Chebar. When the cherubim went, the wheels went beside them. And when the cherubim lifted their wings to mount up from the earth, the same wheels also did not turn from beside them. When the cherubim stood still, the wheels stood still, and when one was lifted up, the other lifted itself up, for the spirit of the living creature was in them. This is some interesting description by Ezekiel. We don't ever see anything in Revelation that's a direct quote from the Old Testament. I think I've mentioned this in past times. Nothing is a direct quote, but similar things from the Old Testament are in the letter of Revelation. Once again, looking at the throne scene, we'll look a little bit more about the elders and the 4 living creatures here. In Revelation 19, 4 and 5, the 24 elders and the 4 living creatures fell down and worshiped God who sat on the throne, saying, Amen, Alleluia. One commentator says that the 4 creatures represent angels, but Revelation 5:11 and 7:11 indicate that something else is meant. And here they are. Revelation 5:11, then I looked and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000. Then again in 7:11, all the angels stood around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God. So the point of it is that these 4 living creatures did not represent angels. Angels were a completely different entity entirely, and we see that in these 2 passages here. There are other interpretations, such as they're representing the eternal watchfulness of God. But Ray Summers, from his book, Worthy is the Lamb, says that they represent the 4-fold division of animal life, so that all of God's creatures are worshiping him. The lion represents wild animal life, the calf, domestic animal life, the man, human life, and the eagle, bird life. And this would seem the most appropriate understanding of their existence before God. Psalms 148 gives reinforcement to this thought also. And I see I'm out of time. I didn't realize it. When I talk a lot, time goes too fast. We will pick up whenever I have the opportunity to do this again. I apologize for having to stop right at this point, but I'm a little bit over time, so we'll just stop at this point. Thank you for your attention. And I hope some of this is helping you to understand that Revelation has a lot of symbolism in it. And we got to understand that we may not always understand the symbolism. Thank you.